All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking open one of the heaviest, most influential, and honestly most controversial books in economics, Karl Marx's Das Kapital. It's a real beast, so let's try to break it down.
So Marx had this incredibly ambitious goal. He wasn't just trying to describe what happens in the economy. He wanted to get under the hood, to find the fundamental laws of motion, the engine that makes capitalism tick.
But how in the world do you start something like that? Do you look at banks, global trade, the government? His answer was actually much, much simpler and way more fundamental than all of that.
He didn't start with the big, flashy stuff. No. He started with the most basic, boring, everyday thing you can imagine in our society. The commodity. Just a thing you buy. He saw this as the single cell, the basic DNA of the entire economic system.
Okay, so according to Marx, every single commodity has this kind of split personality. On the one hand, it has a use value. It's useful for something, right? A jacket keeps you warm, coffee wakes you up. That's what you, the buyer, care about. But it also has an exchange value, what you can get for it in a trade, and that's all the seller really cares about. This simple idea, though, leads to a really deep question.
Think about it. A chair and a loaf of bread are completely different things. They do totally different jobs. So how on earth can we say that one chair is worth, 100 loaves of bread? What's the common stuff inside them that lets us even make that comparison?
And here's Marx's big leap. He argued that if you strip away all their physical differences, their shape, their material, their purpose, there's only one thing left that they all share. They are all products of human labor. Their value, he said, is like a ghost. It's the crystallized human work hidden inside them.
This idea that labor is the source of all value, it opens up the next big piece of the puzzle. Because it turns out labor itself has a dual nature, just like the commodities it creates. It also has two faces.
So first you have concrete labor. That's the specific skill, the carpentry that makes a chair or the baking that makes bread. That's what creates the use value. But then there's abstract labor. This is just human effort in general, the expenditure of time, muscle, and brain power, and that's what creates exchange value. It's the thing that lets us compare the very different work of a carpenter and a baker.
Now this is where it gets really clever. The value of something isn't based on how long it took one particular person to make it. No, it's based on the average time society needs to pump it out. The example of the power loom is perfect for this. When it was invented, it suddenly took way less time to make cloth. And just like that, the value of all cloth, even the stuff made slowly by hand, got slashed. Your hard work was suddenly worth less, not because you changed, but because society did.
Okay, so this leads us to the central mystery of the whole book. If things are just exchanged for their equivalents, if a capitalist sells a product for a price that just reflects the labor that went into it, where does profit come from? It should be impossible, right? It's like you're just trading a dollar for a dollar. How does a surplus, a profit, just appear out of thin air?
To solve this riddle, Marx zooms his microscope in on one very, very special commodity. A commodity that's bought and sold every day, but is totally unlike anything else on the market.
See, a worker doesn't sell their actual labor. They sell their ability to work for a certain amount of time, their labor power. And just like any commodity, its value is the labor time it takes to produce it. In this case, that means the value of the food, the shelter, the clothes, everything a worker needs to be able to show up for work again tomorrow.
And here is the secret. Let's break down the working day. A worker might create enough value to cover their own wage in, say, the first 4 hours of their shift. Marx called this necessary labor. It's the part of the day where they're basically working for themselves.
But of course, the worker doesn't go home after 4 hours. They work the full 8-hour day. So what about those other 4 hours? Well, that is surplus labor. It's unpaid labor that creates surplus value directly for the capitalist. And this, Marx says, is the hidden source of all profit. It's not cheating. It's baked right into the system.
So now that we've found where profit comes from, we can zoom back out. Because capitalists aren't just sitting around enjoying this surplus value all by themselves. Oh no.
They are in a constant, brutal war with each other. They're locked in a battle for market share, and as Marx puts it, the main weapon in this war is making your stuff cheaper than the other guys.
This constant fight forces every capitalist to take their profits and reinvest them into better, faster, more efficient machinery. It's an endless race to boost productivity so you can lower your prices and crush your rivals. This isn't really about personal greed. It's a law of survival. In this system, you grow or you die. The big fish eat the small fish.
But here's the massive twist. This relentless pressure to mechanize, the very thing that makes the system so incredibly productive, it also creates a deep, hidden contradiction for capitalism as a whole, a flaw that emerges from its own success.
Just think about it. As factories get more and more automated, the amount of money tied up in machines and raw materials, what Marx calls constant capital, it just explodes. It grows way, way faster than the money spent on actual human workers, the variable capital, which is the only thing that actually creates new value.
And that right there is the core problem. The amount of machinery per worker can basically rise forever, but the amount of surplus value you can squeeze out of a human worker, that has very real limits. I mean, there are only 24 hours in a day, and you can only push wages so low.
So Marx's conclusion is this: because profit only comes from living labor, but investment is constantly shifting away from labor and towards machines, there's a long-term downward pressure on the overall rate of profit for the entire economy. It's a paradox. Every individual capitalist is forced to mechanize to survive, but by doing so, they collectively help to saw off the branch they're all sitting on.
And eventually, this falling rate of profit can hit a breaking point. A point where there's just so much capital invested that adding even more brings in little to no extra profit. This, for Marx, is what triggers a major economic crisis. He called it an absolute overproduction of capital. Not too many goods, but too much capital chasing too little profit.
So there you have it. You can see the whole logical chain that Marx built, like a line of dominoes. It all starts with the humble commodity. From there, he builds a theory of value, which explains the origin of profit. That profit drives competition. Competition forces mechanization, and that mechanization ultimately leads to crisis. Each piece follows from the last. And that, of course, is the huge, provocative question Capital leaves hanging in the air. Are these laws of motion that he described over 150 years ago still running the show? Are they still shaping the world of automation, competition, and crisis that we live in today? That's the debate, and it's still raging.